It's good to see you all on this webinar. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to talk about GA4, the final countdown. So as I say, you will get a recording, and those who are a little late joining will receive a copy of the recording as well. So my name's Daniel Jenkins. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm head of client services here at WAGADA Digital. I'll make sure that you get my Twitter on there when you get the deck, and also please don't hesitate to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. I am a big LinkedIner as well, and you'll have my email address on there, but I'd be more than happy to carry on the conversation with anybody afterwards via LinkedIn. Just want to quickly introduce my colleague as well, Emily Walker. Emily Walker is an SEO specialist here at WAGADA Digital. So she's got expertise across a number of our platforms, including GA4. But Emily, did you want to quickly say hi?
Yes, hello, my name's Emily, as Dan said, obviously. I've been at the WAGADA for about 4 years now, and a member of the digital delivery team. So really happy to be on this webinar with you guys today.
Fabulous. Thanks, Emily. So just to let you know, I'm going to be talking you through some updates, some key things to consider and be aware of with the GA4 switchover. And then Emily Walker is going to be jumping on and giving you a bit of a dynamic walkthrough. So there are some of the areas that I'm going to be talking about as part of this webinar that Emily is then going to show you live within the platform as well. But it's not all about us. We are part of an exciting, growing team of more than 20 across 2 locations. We have our head office in St Albans in Hertfordshire, but also our second office in Cheltenham in the west of England, where I'm currently zooming in and speaking to you from. We work with businesses right the way across the UK and also internationally, offering the full mix of digital marketing services. Whilst we have our origins in search engine optimization and SEO, we are a strategy-led and results-focused digital agency with experts that cover Google ads, Facebook advertising, organic social media, search engine optimization. We're also HubSpot partners. So we do a lot of sales and marketing alignments with businesses, and we build websites across a number of platforms, including WordPress, but also HubSpot as well. So that's us, WAGADA Digital, and it'd be great to chat afterwards if you'd like to find out any more. So first things first, what do I need to know? Well, I suppose the most important thing is that the countdown to the GA4 switch is on. This is a live screen grab from our website. I took this, I think, yesterday. So at the point of taking this, there were 74 days, 7 hours, 46 minutes, and 59 seconds left until the big switchover. So the most important thing is to get your data analytics and reporting in order between now and then. Summer this year, Universal Analytics is going to stop collecting new data. Historical data that's being stored will be deleted on January the 1st, 2024 as well. So you need to act now to protect your data analysis, ahead of the switchover. So if you do want to find out a little bit more or get some support, don't hesitate to reach out to me afterwards as well. We do support brands with their GA4 setup. We also do full GA4 setup and configuration, training and consultancy. And if you're already using GA4 and Google Tag Manager, we can offer audits and solutions there as well. So again, please don't hesitate to chat and we can see what services are best suited for you. So let's talk a little bit about the switch itself. What does it actually mean? Well, as I say, July is the month. So we've got between now and July to get everything in order. Now, until July 2023, you can continue to use and collect new data in your Universal Analytics properties, okay? After July the 1st, 2023, you'll be able to access your previously processed data in your Universal Analytics property for at least 6 months. Okay, so you can still access that previously processed data in UA, the traditional Google Analytics. Google says, we know your data is important to you. We strongly encourage you to export your historical reports during this time. In the coming months, we'll provide a future date for when existing UA properties will no longer be available. After this future date, you'll no longer be able to see your Universal Analytics reports in the analytics interface, etc. A lot of people ask me, can I have the 2 bits of code running at the same time on my website? The answer is yes. There's no harm in that. So if you've got your UA registering, recording data on the website and your GA4 recording it at the same time, there is no harm in that whatsoever. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to double up data within any one of them. So you can have the two running in tandem. It's just that we need to bear in mind that one is effectively going to cut out. We've just sent an email out as well to those who had some difficulty due to Eventbrite. So Emily is just letting those in. And just to let you all know, those who are joining a few minutes late, we've only just started, and you also get a copy of the recording afterwards as well. Now, one of the most important things to consider with GA4 is shorter data retention. So this is key. When we get our GA4 set up, and Emily's going to talk to you a little bit about this and a couple of things that you can put in place to support with this. It's all about moving towards data protection, right? So for Google Analytics 4 properties, retention of user level data, including conversions, can be set to a maximum of 14 months. And for all other event data, you can choose the length of retention between 2 months and 14 months. The key difference here is that previously Universal Analytics would store data for years. So you could look back at 2020, 2021, 2022. I remember when we were doing data analysis with clients in 2022, for example, or 2021, I should say, because 2020 was such an anomaly year, whilst clients wanted to do a comparison between 2021 and 2020, they also wanted to look at 2019 to go, what were we like pre-pandemic versus the year post the initial impact of the global pandemic, for obvious reasons. The challenges that you're going to have moving forward is that the data retention is not that long. And I believe that the reason it's 14 months rather than 12 is purely to enable quarterly reporting. So for example, you could look at the whole of Q1 2023 versus the whole of Q1 2022. But the problem that you're going to have moving forward is that it's not storing data any older than that. So you're not going to have that freedom as a marketer to, in quite such an agile way, move through your data and start looking at 2020, 2019 versus 2023. So we need to start changing the way that we're thinking and kind of how and when we are looking at we're looking at data. There's also a much bigger emphasis on user journey in GA4. Okay, so I'm going to use the phrase a few times about how we need to think a little bit differently about how we acknowledge data. And that's because GA4 is going to be used more prevalently to monitor and better understand trends, okay? And again, a big part of that is because it's using machine learning. Welcome to those who have just joined. There was an issue with Eventbrite, I understand, this morning, but you will get a copy of the recording afterwards. So there's a much bigger move towards trends and user journey. The journey that a user, a consumer is taking on your website and beyond is much more a part of how we analyze data within GA4. So to give you an idea, it's looking quite heavily at something called path exploration. It wants to future-proof data. It's moving towards cookieless data. So it's relying more and more on machine learning, okay? A path exploration starts with a screen or an event that represents the first step of the user's journey. You can then see the next top 5 screens viewed or events triggered by the user following that initial step. You can also create a backwards path, which shows you the steps leading up to a final step. And along the way, you can expand that graph to show what users did in each step. Emily's going to touch upon this a little bit later on when she does her walkthrough. But again, the key with this is that it's so much more about different elements of content marketing and user flow within a website. And it's not so heavily focused on that final conversion. So Universal Analytics previously was much more focused on, I do this tactic, what signups do I get? I do this tactic, what sales do I get? And much more heavily focused on that. Moving forward, it's using trends and data to better point you down different areas of the website to improve on your user journey. Something else that is much less prevalent is bounce rate. And bounce rate is something that we're not really engaging with as marketers in the same way anymore. So for those who aren't familiar with a bounce rate was the concept that somebody would land on a page and then they would leave without taking any further action or moving through to another page on the website. They would bounce. That can often be a very misleading statistic. Most notably because if you have a strong piece of content, a blog or a service page, for example, that is ranking for some key phrases, that means you've got a huge amount of visibility and traffic, a proportion of those may never be your customer. They might not convert. They might not go through to the next phase. They might not be qualified traffic. Welcome, sorry, those who are just joining. I know I've said this a few times, but there has been an issue with Eventbrite, so I'm glad that we've been able to get the link out to you, and you will receive a full recording afterwards. Yeah, so with bounce rate, it's much, much less part of how we're going to be analyzing data moving forward. But what are we looking at instead? How are we engaging with those types of metrics? So in GA4, bounce rate is the percentage of sessions that were not engaged sessions. So in other words, it's the inverse of engagement rate. So in Universal Analytics, it was the percentage of all sessions on the site in which users viewed only one page and triggered only one request to the server. It's a reasonable measure of site engagement, but it's become less useful as websites and apps have changed. For example, it's possible for users to view a single page application and leave without trigger an event, which would be considered as a bounce. So again, we're looking at it much differently, and we're not focusing in on that as a metric. Something else that's very, very important, and this is particularly prevalent if you've got the two properties running in tandem. If you've got your GA4 running and you've got your Universal Analytics running at the same time, you cannot compare like for like with the data. So you may see different numbers. You may see discrepancies, okay? One might show bigger traffic than the other. And you might be looking at that thinking there's something wrong in your setup. 9 times out of 10, there won't be something wrong in your setup. There could be, but chances are there's another reason. So user activity is detected automatically in GA4. Now, in contrast, Universal Analytics relies on manual instrumentation. So it's the firing of events. So a user can launch an app and be considered an active user in GA4, but not in Universal Analytics. In layman's terms, what does this mean? Well, it may lead to higher active user counts in Google Analytics 4. So some aspects of session counting in GA4 are going to differ. So in Universal Analytics, a new campaign will start a new session regardless of any activity whatsoever. But in GA4, a new campaign doesn't just begin a new session. So it's all about engaged sessions and how users are navigating through the site. More and more as well, you need to be prepared for the fact that people might have opted out of cookies. So if people have opted out of cookies, you're going to get different data entirely. And why all these changes? Why GA4? Well, folks, it does all come back to the cookies, right? So we've seen it with clients as well, where we've put a cookie policy in place and traffic literally appears to fall off a cliff. And that's because a number of people are opting out of third-party cookies, opting out of optional cookies. They're just purely selecting the essential cookies, the cookies that are needed for a site to function effectively. And the truth is that Google is just one of the many platforms and organizations that is phasing out third-party cookies. So GA4 uses first-party cookies to keep data compliant with GDPR. Okay, so it's being promoted as privacy-centric and has been designed to work with or without third-party cookies. So by leveraging machine learning and statistical modeling and all those fancy techie words, GA4 can fill in the gaps as the world becomes less and less dependent on cookies. And I'm going to show you in a moment, as will Emily, some things in GA4 where we can much better understand our audiences, who's engaging with our website, but through machine learning and Google's knowledge of the customers in a new way than perhaps it did previously. So privacy-centric, machine learning, statistical modeling, you know, what does it all actually mean? Well, ultimately, as marketers, we need to change the way that we think about and analyze data. If this is prompting any questions for you, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'm going to hand over to Emily shortly, and after her walkthrough, I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to answer as many questions as we can. So if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the chat or message Emily or I privately. I understand sometimes you'd rather ask a question anonymously or you don't want your business to be mentioned. Don't hesitate to reach out privately. So as marketers, ultimately, we need to change the way that we think about and analyze data. So what are some of the main differences between GA4 and the classic universal analytics? Well, instead of website performance being based on page views, GA4 is based on a flexible events structure. So to give context to these events, they're labeled under different parameters, okay? So an event is going to allow you to measure a distinct user interaction on a website or an app. For example, loading a page, clicking a link, completing a purchase. These can all be events that are triggered within your GA4. Something called BigQuery is also free up to a point with GA4 for large data sets. And BigQuery is a cloud data warehouse. It allows you to run high volume data very, very quickly. It can be more accurate. We don't have the time to go into that today, but if you do have any questions about BigQuery, again, don't hesitate to reach out and perhaps we can pick up the conversation separately. But what you want to be considering with GA4 is potentially having more events set up than perhaps goals that you might have had on your previous Google Analytics. And there are 4 different types of events. Some are automatically collected events. Those are events that are automatically just being collected and that GA4 recognizes across your website. There are enhanced measurement events, recommended events, and custom events. The recommended events being what might be recommended by GA4 for you to use, and custom ones are the ones that you may put in. So if you've produced a piece of content or you've got a new white paper or there's something that you really want to very, very quickly move on and be able to track the success of from a campaign, you can do that for key points. GA4 also has advanced spam blocking filters for known bots and spiders. So whilst you might want to put certain blocks in place, so for example, if you've got, I don't know, members of your team regularly accessing GA4, you might want to put in place blockers for their IPs so that you don't regularly see, that we don't regularly see, you know, that traffic. So for example, a sales team that are always off and on. But GA4 is also generally better at blocking spam traffic that could be coming from overseas, other countries, or from other ad platforms and campaigns. Just to chat you through as well, finally then, before I hand over to Emily Walker, some new or perhaps some slightly more advanced features of GA4. I touched briefly upon attribution. There's been a question that's come through in the chat, and I will, it's really important actually, so I will touch upon it in a moment before I hand over to Em. This is going to be a super, super useful tool for you, looking at the path analysis and how you can attribute success. In this screenshot example, you can see, this is taken from our own website, you can see where a trigger begun from a session start, okay? This is the path exploration tool that's going to better enable you to see how your users are navigating through the website. And you can see that from that session start, the primary page was that SEO page, and below that, you can see 10 or 20% of our traffic was the jobs page. But where it starts to get super interesting is that you then look at that next step. So in that example, after people have engaged with that service page, you can see towards the top and the middle on this screenshot, over 100 viewed the team page. You know, we're a service-based business, people buy people. And it gives you an opportunity to better look at what content or areas of your website you need to be focusing on. Okay, so if 20% of people that viewed your most popular service page are then directly moving through to, I don't know, the team page or more product details or a blog, for example, is the user journey and the content on your website meeting your customers' needs so that when they move on to engage with that content, they're getting the right customer experience that is inevitably going to lead to them converting, for example. This is just one example, but the point is that you can explore this tool and it's going to be much, much more beneficial than the previous path analysis and ways of using universal analytics. It's much more effective. It's much more user-friendly and visible as well. Custom audiences are actually very, very important. Now, you can start to build new audiences and segments. Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Emily Walker, that you need to have some minimums in place. There needs to be some numbers so that you can't just do it if you have, I don't know, 10 website visitors, for example. There needs to be a minimum number to be able to build those audiences. And a big part of that is to do with data, data sort of protection and it not being too hyper specific. But Google will suggest to you these audiences. And if you've got an e-commerce website, for example, you can be looking at recently active users, purchasers, 7-day lapsed purchasers. For example, purchasers who are once active but have not been active for the last 7 days. So if you've got quite a fast moving product or something that you want to be able to build audiences based upon, you have the opportunity to do that. Non-purchasers, so perhaps users that haven't made a purchase, and you can start to segment that audience. But under the configuration piece within GA4, you can add these new audiences and you can create them from scratch or use a template. But the benefit for this is that it can be pulled through into Google Ads. So you see the connection there? That one big buzzword, Google, right? Google owned. So you can be generating traffic to your website through organic search, through any other activity, through email marketing. But ultimately, when Google then gets ownership of that data, it can be used for other Google tools. Welcome to those who are joining. I'll make sure you do get a recording of this afterwards. Just another couple of bits and pieces. So again, this comes back to, I think, a couple of the questions that I'm quickly going to touch upon. There are predictive audiences. And again, this is machine learning. So predictive audiences use machine learning to predict the future behavior of your users, including the probability to purchase. And this move, again, towards machine learning is Google's effort to future-proof data in the wake of GDPR and public hesitancy over data privacy. So to give you an idea, this is only eligible for businesses with a larger volume of e-commerce purchases, okay? So this now is not like the previous audiences where we saw people who have done this, people who have behaved in this way in the last week. This is literally Google Analytics going, I believe I can put together an audience for you of people who are likely to purchase in the next 7 days, who are predicted to be your top spenders in the next 28 days. Likely 7-day churning purchases, purchasing users who are likely to not visit your property in the next 7 days. Do you see where we're going with this? So if you're developing large traffic volumes or you're selling product online, this can be highly, highly effective, because then you could be servicing these people with display advertising on the display ads network through Google Ads, even through a number, even through search ads and ways of doing campaigns on Google Ads, whereby you can take the audiences that are harnessed through the way that users are engaging with your website on GA4. So you've got all the opportunity to do that as well. Fabulous. Before I hand over to Emily Walker, who is going to give you a bit of a dynamic walkthrough of some of these areas and talk about a couple of these key points in a little bit more detail, I just want to acknowledge a couple of the questions that have popped up on the chat. So if you bear with me just a moment. Tom has asked, do you think that machine learning element of GA4 means it is less accurate as a tool for performance reporting? Can we trust the gap it is filling as a reliable indicator of actual user behavior, or should it only be used as indicative of trends? That is a really, really important question. The truth is that it is going to vary based on a number of factors, based on the volumes of traffic that you're having coming through, how much can be used to fill those gaps. You know, like any sampling, the larger the volume, the more accurate the machine learning. The truth is that I think that we can only now trust that data to a degree. And what I'm working on with the team here and how we're working with clients and how we're communicating data is that we have to be very, very transparent in what we believe is accurate data, what we believe is highly accurate data, or what we believe is literally indicative of trends. And sometimes we are going to need to look at it as being indicative of trends. But when that is the case, we need to make sure that our conversion tracking and the things that we've got in place as a business is sound. So are we using customer relationship management tools like HubSpot or Salesforce? Do we know through these methods where our customers are coming from? Are we asking them the right questions in the sales process as well? There are a number of ways to analyze data, but more and more, rather than looking at it as just in isolation and being very, very confident with the marketing data that we're getting from GA4 or Google Analytics, we're going to need to tie up the dots. And the team this end, for example, on client services, and also Emily, the team that Emily's a part of, the digital services team, they're having to put far more opinion and subjectivity onto objective data for us to be able to make better decisions as marketers, because of the cookieless future and where we're going. But the truth is that we have to embrace that, because this cookieless future is not going anywhere. Hope that answers your question, but shout if you've got any more. Tim's asking, great question, are the results repeatable? I'm sure we've all been burnt by giving stats from sample data that then changes the next time you run it. That's a really, really good question. Something to be careful of as well is when you're pulling from Google Analytics into other tools, because the sampling can, other tools can then sample if there's only so much that they can go from. What I would say though is to just really analyze that data in the moment and make sure that you know fully whether that is accurate data or sampling data before you start using that, reporting that. I might ask a specialist though regarding the repeatable aspect that you've just asked, and get a little bit more clarity and a little bit more on that. John has asked, I've read that for social tracking, you need to be using UTM tracking. Is this correct? Yes, I could talk for an hour or more about UTM tracking, so we don't go into it in great depth in this. But in order to be able to better pull in data as well, you want to be able to set up what are called UTM links. So that if you're doing things like social media campaigns, those lovely long links that you see that are like traffic, campaign name. So absolutely, UTM tracking is really, really important. And it can help you get accuracy in terms of route and path and how people are finding you. I'm going to just quickly run through the final questions here. Peter's seeing an issue with audience creation. That's a great question. So actually, I'd like to answer that one separately, if that's okay, because I might have to ask a couple more questions or ask a member of the team to look at that a bit more specifically with you. So I'd like to have a little look at that one properly. Tim is saying, do we know what the definition of a purchaser is? Our website is basically a lead generation tool. We have goals set. Yeah, I don't think it would count for things like your machine learning and your predictive audiences. I think that would need to be e-commerce and large volume. So I doubt you'd have the volumes needed either in order to make that work, even as a lead generation tool. Again, I will clarify that with the team. Having goals set up for the important lead forms is key, but I've got a feeling that you would need a much larger volume of actual e-commerce purchases for it to be able to create those audiences. And you can do, yeah, I mean, some of the engaged users piece and things, that's where you're going to find it potentially a bit easier. To Sharon's question as well kind of links up. So those looking for inquiries, content downloads, again, it would vary a little bit based on volume. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions whilst Emily's doing a walkthrough to a couple of experts. But really, I think that it's going to need to be a volume game. So even if you are a B2B solutions business and you have things like lead gen, gatewayed content, downloadable forms, I think there's going to need to be a certain volume of that in order for it to be able to build out those custom audiences. But you can absolutely put into place the events for all of these things. So you should probably have a larger number of like micro events on your website. So all these different white paper downloads can be registering as all these different events. You want to make sure that you've got that in place. But I will find out a little bit more regarding the specifics of volume and numbers. Brilliant. Fabulous. I hope that answers your questions. What I'd like to do now, if that's okay, is hand you over to Emily, and Emily's going to give a dynamic walkthrough. I think it's going to be about 20-25 minutes, which will bring us up until around the 1/2 point. But if anybody does want to stay on, Emily Walker and I are available to answer any questions just beyond 1/2 as well. So if you do have further questions beyond the 1-hour webinar, I'd love to take the opportunity to answer those and go through those as well. But without further ado, I hope this has been beneficial so far, and I'm going to hand you over to Emily, who is going to take us inside the platform.
Thank you. I'll just get my screen ready. If you could all just let me know that you can see my screen okay. Dan, if you give me a thumbs up, perfect. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is walk through a GA4 property, take a look at 2 key configurations that you need to have in place to make the most out of your data. And then we'll walk through setting up a custom audience, like Dan mentioned earlier. And then finally, have a brief overview of the standard reports and then create a custom report within the platform. So a complete GA4 property setup could vary or differ on a case-by-case basis. We've talked a lot about e-commerce, and then you've got B2B sites that may not have that same form of lead generation. So, for example, a large e-commerce site may have a different configuration from a smaller blog. However, there are two key configurations that are essential across all sites of all shapes and all sizes. So to run through these configurations, I'm going to be using this generic sample property. And the first one we're going to kick off with is adjusting that data retention period. So as Dan mentioned, the retention period can be extended to a maximum of 14 months. You'll see when you go into your settings, so the admin cog here, and then data settings and data retention, you'll see that the default retention period in GA4 is 2 months. Now, this is the retention period that is assigned to the data we use to create custom reports, and they're the deeper insights and the more in-depth reports, which GA4 is really great at creating. So you want to have as much data as possible. So it's highly recommended that you extend this from the 2 months to the 14 months. So it's a simple process. Just choose the 14 months on the drop down and then click on save. And then that's then done for you. So you'll be able to create custom explorations with as much data as possible. You'll still have the data you need for standard reports. This is the retention period is specifically for custom and deeper insights. The second configuration that's key for any site is to review and filter out any unwanted traffic. By that, I mean, you want to make sure your data is as clean as possible. You want it to only include your genuine users and genuine behavior on the website. You want to filter out any internal users that might be staff or in some cases, web development teams. So to review and create filters, we head to our admin section, head to our data stream, click through to our configure tag settings, and then just click on this show all so we can see all of the options available. And you'll see that there is a define internal traffic option. We click into there, you'll see that we can create internal filters. So I've done one already here, but I'm going to create a new one with you now. So we'll click on create, and we're just going to name this GA4 training, and we'll call it headquarters. So the defining an internal traffic, we do this by IP address. So we want to select that the IP equals, and then this handy link here will let you know what your IP address is. And we can simply copy and paste that into the value field. So you want to do this for any location where you have staff operating from. But the IP address does need to be static, so it doesn't change. For example, if you've got staff working from home or a remote, they more likely have, or most likely will have, a dynamic IP address, and it changes too frequently to keep in touch, keep up with the filter. So once we've created that, we've then defined our internal traffic, and what we'll need to do is activate this filter. So if we head back to our settings, and then head to data filters, we'll see we've got an internal traffic filter here that's currently in testing. What we need to do is just click into that and activate the filter, and then anything we specify as internal traffic will then be filtered out of our reporting. If you do need to filter out any developer traffic, that might be someone who might be testing events or testing configurations using Tag Manager, it's a great idea to create a filter to filter out any form of developer tracking. You can just create a new, select developer, and then we can call this GA4 training developer. What that will do is exclude any event that includes the debug mode. So that's anyone that could be using a tool such as Google Tag Manager, and we can activate that and activate the filter. And that's all done. So they're the two key configurations that we highly recommend you review and have in place when you create your GA4 property. So moving on, we'll head to creating a custom audience. So say, for example, we're a skincare brand and we have a we know we have a well-established market with women, but we might be interested to know what, say, men are doing on our website, just to see how the different behaviors between the two demographics behave on the site. So we head to admin, we'll head to audiences, and we can head to new audience. So as Dan mentioned, you have the option to create an audience from scratch, or you can use the suggested or ready-made templates. So we're going to create this audience from scratch. You can see on the left-hand side, this is where we're going to actually specify what we want our audience to be. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a membership duration of 30 days. That's fine, you can keep that there. You have this audience trigger here, which is a great tool to use. You'll get an alert when a new user enters your audience. It's quite a nice way to measure how your audiences are growing. And then the summary section here will give you an indication of the size of that audience. So we're going to name this audience men, all ages, and then choose a demographic of gender as one of male. And perhaps we're interested in whether there are young men on our site. So we might add an extra demographic and add in an age as well. And then we can click save. What's great about these filters is that once they're saved, you can use them for your Google ads or your advertising strategy, as Dan mentioned, but you can also use them in your analytics. So you can click straight through to an audience that you've created and have a look at the key metrics. You can also compare audience against one another to see that's how you can maybe do a little bit of split testing between age groups, between genders and different locations, for example. So that's how you set up create a custom audience. What we're going to do now is head to our WAGADA GA4 property. I'm going to walk through the different reports, so the standard reports, and then we will come to build a custom report. So when you log into your GA4 property, you come to your home dashboard, and then on the left, you'll see your menu options. So we're going to click on reports. And this will take you to your report snapshot. This is probably where you're going to spend majority of your time whilst in this platform. It basically has a snapshot of everything that's going on your website during a set period of time. So the set period of time by default in GA4 is 28 days, but you can change this to any window that is significant to you or significant to your business. So we'll just walk through what we've got here. So we've got our key metrics being users, new users, average engagement time, and revenue, should you be an e-commerce store. And then to the right here, we've got a snapshot of the real-time traffic. That's anything that's happening on your website right now or within the last 30 minutes. You can see that the report snapshot is really made up of a series of cards, and they're giving you just a window of important information. So if we scroll down, we can see what traffic sources are bringing us our new users to the website, so how new users are finding your website online. And then to the right of that, you have the traffic sources that are bringing in sessions. So that could be your campaign, actual traffic driving campaigns that you're leveraging. Scrolling down, we can see a little bit more about our users. You've got users by country, and you've got to the right here your retention. So depending on your business model, it might be really important for you to retain customers so they keep coming back to your website, especially if you're an e-commerce store and you want repeat purchases. So this report's really interesting. So you can see here as an example, between the 5th and the 11th of March, we had 190 users. And then the week after, we had 5% of those users came back. But as I said, it does depend on your business model, whether this report is going to be beneficial for you. Scrolling down again, we have a bit more information about our users. So how your users are, this is kind of their activity over time. You get a snapshot of 30 days, 7 days, and 1 day. And this is a really nice report to use to see how the activity is growing on the website. To the right, you've got top most viewed pages. And then to the right again, your top events. So this is any activity that's happening on your website. Scrolling down further, so we're getting towards the end now, you've got the top conversions. This is any specific event that leads to a purchase or a lead or anything, a marketing lead that might lead to a business goal. And lastly, you've got platforms. So this is just a GA4 property for a website. So we've only got one platform, but say you do have apps, you would have the comparison here as well. What's really great about this snapshot report, well, this report snapshot, because it is where you spend majority of your time, it's highly customizable. So if you see this little pen icon here, you can click on there and you'll see that the cards on the left are reflected on this list on the right. And you can simply drag and drop these cards to change the order to get the information that you need quickly. You can also delete cards that you don't need. For example, as I said, this is a GA4 for a website, so maybe I don't need that insight initially. I can delete that card, but I might be very interested in knowing what other snapshot data I can get. For example, I'd be very interested in knowing where our users are by city. So I can select that card and add that to my snapshot report. When I click on save, I can choose to save this to a current report or save it as a new report. This is really handy if I'm on a specific team and I only need certain bits of information. So you can really tailor GA4 to give you the information you need as quickly as possible so you can carry on with what you need to do and make your decisions. So you can name the new report or you can just save it to your current report. So now we're going to head back and have a look at the reports that we've got down on the left. And to really get into some juicy data, I'm going to take us to the Google merchandise shop. There's a lot of data to get to dive into here, so it's a really good property to have a play around in and really dig through. So it's important to leverage your report snapshot so you can compare the performance of your website between different periods of time. For example, seasonal trends or year-on-year performance. So if we're here on the Google merchandise shop property, and we're going to head to our report snapshot, where we've got lots of our juicy data. But what we'll be really interested in is how well we've done over the last quarter or year on year. So we come over to our date range and we can use this compare option here and simply just compare the same period to the previous year. So we're looking at the 21st of March to the 17th of April, 2023 versus 2022. This is where you can really see the trends. So what dips in this case for the Google Merchandise Store, but you could see your growth and your dips for different key aspects. See what's working and what's not working. So you can see each of the cards is now showing a comparison. So we've got a dip in this case in the number of new users coming to the site. We've got the trend in campaign sessions. So this is the activity we're leveraging. And we've got the trend for how users are finding our website. We've got the trend for where users are coming from. So a little dip from the US, for example, but up in Canada. So it's a really nice snapshot to get the growth and the trends that are appearing on your website. So we'll walk through the basic standard reports before we then move on to create a custom report.
Sorry, just a very quick question. Rebecca's asking, does the compare option work if you've only just added the GA4 code to your site? I guess you'll need to build up data, right?
You will need to build up data, yeah. So as soon as you can still, the comparison window is quite small. So you can compare one day on one day if you wanted to, but you would need to, there's no historical there. So you'll only get data
would help
from
you
when
identify the trend then, though, wouldn't it? At least, even if it was just a day or a couple of days or a week or
yeah,
something.
yeah. So like, say for example, you did install the code and then you could probably immediately see whether you've got like say heavy traffic over a weekend or a weekday, if that's where the kind of the implementation has landed. So you can probably get some quite quickly. Yeah. So moving to the basic report, starting off with real time. This is a really cool report, and it's a little bit addictive, but it's a great report to see what is happening on your website right now within the last 30 minutes. It's a great report to use if you've got a campaign that's just gone live, or even a site launch. I'd have to admit I've had this up before when I've had a site launch, and it's just it's quite exciting to sit and watch the users come through and see the events that they're carrying out on the website. So you're seeing here where the users have come from, where they're based, what pages they're visiting, what they're doing on the website, and any conversions they might be leading to. Great report, but yeah, as I said, quite addictive. Moving down to life cycle, this is what tells you how people are coming to the site and what's happening on the site. Starting off with acquisition, this is how users are finding your website online. The overview report is probably where you'll spend most of the time in this particular report. So user acquisition is all about how new users are finding your website. Sessions is all about how you're leveraging traffic via different sources, whether it be organic search, paid social, or Google Ads. Any of your paid Google Ads will also appear in this report here as well. You can click through to the specific reports from these cards, or you can use the menu options on the left. Moving down to engagement and the overview, this is basically what's happening on your website, what users are doing on the site. From here, you can see the events that are being completed along with conversions. You can also see the page, so the page titles, that's the pages that the most top viewed pages on the website. And a more recent addition in the last few months has been the landing page report as well. So that's where people are entering your site. Moving down to monetization, that's all about e-commerce and buying behavior. If you're an e-commerce store, the e-commerce purchases report is probably where you'd spend most of your time. There you have a breakdown of the items that have been viewed, added to the cart, purchased, and then the resulting revenue from those transactions. And then finally, within the life cycle, we have retention. This is all the data and analytics regarding returning users. So this is if you do need users to come back, or you require repeat business via your website, this will be a really useful report for you. Moving down to users, this is what tells. So we've gone through these reports here, and this tells us what's happening on our site, how are we getting the traffic. But the user report is really handy. It's telling us who is coming to our website. So it's where we learn about our users. Our demographic overview is where we would probably spend most time or getting the snapshot data in this particular report. As you can see, we've got users by country, city, gender, interests, age, and language. You can change your dates and comparisons all the time. You're free. There's a lot of fluidity in these reports. Moving on to tech. This is a report that probably people don't use as much, but it's actually a really great report when it comes to deciding where you're going to allocate certain budgets. For example, web development costs as an example. On here, you can see what systems are being used, devices, browsers, so you know where your most engaged users are and what they're using to visit your site. And then you know that's where you need to focus your development work or your optimization work. Just before I go to the custom report, I just wanted to check, Dana, are there any questions that I could answer at this point about the standard reports?
There are quite a few coming through. So what I'm trying to do, because I know we've got a lot in the room, I'm trying to answer them within the chat as much as possible, answer the questions. There was one regarding the comparison tool working on non-e-commerce sites, but I believe that's not just e-commerce, is it? That can the comparison tool you were looking at is any site, really, isn't it? It doesn't have to be e-commerce.
The comparison works for anything. It's more like you're comparing time periods. And
Yeah.
then you're diving into like,
Yeah.
say, you could look at, is my website busier on the weekend? I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. That's where you'll find out you could do a weekday versus a weekend and have a
Yeah.
look at what activity is actually happening on
Yeah.
the site between those periods.
Lydia's also asking a question about linking web and app, but I'm going to reply to that separate. It's quite
Yeah.
specific. The answer is yes, Lydia, but I'm gonna give you some details on that now. And Tracy's asking, this is a great question, so maybe you want to answer this one, Em, just before cracking on.
Yep.
Is there a way of looking at assisted conversions in the new GA4?
There is that is the new kind of attribution report, which I think we can get back to separately on that one. You were discussing earlier in the webinar about the last click. Universal Analytics would attribute the credit to of a conversion to the last click activity. GA4's got, this is where we can benefit from the machine learning. It has cross-device and cross-traffic source attribution now, so you can really see how the credit is passed across different traffic sources for conversions, if that makes sense. But yeah, something we can definitely answer separately. It's a good tool. Does that answer the question, Dan?
Sorry, I was giving you a big thumbs up. Yeah, I
Oh,
think
okay,
so.
sorry, I can't see. I can't see you.
Brilliant.
So perfect. So last thing we're going to do is have a look at the custom report. So that's where this data retention period is really important. The data retention period is what's applied to the data we're going to have a look into now. What's great about GA4 is that it's kind of, it also almost forces you to dive into your data. But you can get some really nice deep insights from the custom report. So we're going to head to explore, and I quite like how they've called it explore, because that is really exactly what we're doing. So we're going to stay in the Google merchandise shop and have a look at the custom reports here. So there's 4 on my screen that you can see, and I'd say that the most common you're going to use are probably the free form, the funnel exploration, which is how you can basically segment the journey for a funnel process, and path exploration, which Dan showed us earlier, how someone actually, or how users, or how certain demographics can actually flow through your website. This is where we're going to get a deeper understanding of our data. I would say it's probably easier to use some of the templated reports. You can start from scratch, but especially when you're starting with GA4, it's great to see what you can already get and then add or take away from that. So I think the most common reports will be these 3 here, but you do have a lot more to choose from, and then also a gallery of ready-made reports as well. So what we're going to do is create a page, a path exploration report for the Google Merchandise Store. So I'm just going to click on there, and it will populate for you. So just to go into a little bit more detail of what we're seeing here. So we've got 2 columns. We've got variables, and then to the right, we've got tab settings. Variables is basically we're deciding what we want to see in the report, so what data we want in the report. And then the tab settings is deciding how that data is displayed in our report.
Just
So
very quickly, folks,
yeah,
apologies. We only have we've just got a couple of minutes left, Emily. I'm conscious we're a
yeah.
little bit late to starting because some people had some difficulty
Mhm.
joining due to Eventbrite. But for those that are able to stay with us, I believe this is the last piece now, Em, and then
Yes, it is. Yeah,
we'd be happy to answer any further questions. But yeah, thank you.
perfect. So to present the data, if this wasn't populated for you already, you would be dragging and dropping what you want to see into your report. So the path exploration is a great report. It's showing how people flow through your website, and you can have your particular date range if you want to look at like a month at a time or a week. Say you've made some changes to your website, you want to see how that's changed the user flow. You can have a look at, say, the week before you made the change and the week after you made the change, but separately. So here from the starting point, we always initiate with a session start, and then you can either keep event name. So as an event would be a page view or a scroll or a click. I like to change it to page title because I quite like to see where the user goes next. So once I've changed that, you'll see the report change for me. And then I can elaborate on where users are going. So we can see most users come through to the home page, but where do they go after? So if I click on there, I get my additional step. And I can see lots of people, or apart from the not set, this is where the data hasn't come through, but you can see that the next proportion of page views is the Google Merchandise Store login. So there's an element of returning users coming to this site. So that's handy to know. And then when we were in the standard reports, we saw that in the demographics, most of the people visiting the site are men. And it's quite just nice to see that reinforced in this page path data here as that being the next highest kind of page. And then you can see where those visitors have gone, and then so on and so on. But what's great about this report is you can also work backwards. As Dan said earlier, you can start from the back. So if we say start again, and I want to know, this could be a checkout page or a purchase event. I want to know what people do before that. Could I make their journey any smoother or less convoluted to this last event? Because that's what I'm most interested in. That could be a contact page for a lead generation website. It might be a lead magnet page or a page where there's an asset to download, but you can start from the back and work forward. So if I select event name, I pop in purchase as an example here. I can select the purchase as the final stop and work backwards from there. And I'm quite interested in the pages rather than the events at the moment. And naturally, you'll see part of the checkout process coming here, but you might be able to get a good idea of, is my checkout process actually a little bit too long? Or is it a little bit convoluted? How are most people getting to my purchase or the most important action for me? And you can work back and actually get up to 10 steps here, which is a lot more than you could get in Universal. I believe Universal was actually, you could go only 3 previous paths. So it's a really great report. That tidies up the custom report, but yeah, Dan, I'll hand over to you to invite any questions that have maybe come out of that part of the walkthrough.
Fab. Emily, thank you so much. If you just want to remove your screen share, then we can see, we can bring everybody back into the room. So folks, it's a lot to go through in an hour. We could spend days talking about this, but hopefully there's been varying kind of takeaways for you along the way. We have had a couple of questions come through, one of which I promised we would tackle at the end, and another one that's just come through now. So we'll move on to those in a moment. Folks, just in the meantime, to let you know, I've popped a couple of details in the chat. We've got a webinar coming up in May, specifically for kind of IT, cyber, software, SaaS, and the tech kind of world. So it's going to be surrounding how to get your website working as an online lead gen tool. It's also going to be beneficial if you're a B2B or, you know, generally focused on online lead generation rather than perhaps sales. So even if you don't specifically work in that sector, there could be some real value in there. And obviously it's completely free to attend, so please don't hesitate to get yourself signed up for that. I've popped the details in the chat. Also, as you know, these webinars are completely free. So if you do feel so inclined, I've also popped our charity partner in there, National Star, and some details of what they're about. They're a specialist education, training and personal development provider in Gloucestershire, but specifically for people with complex disabilities and acquired brain injuries. They're our charity partner for 2023. We're in April, and through a number of activities, we've already raised kind of £950. So we're very, very close to the £1,000 mark, and it'd be fantastic if you could help just get us over the edge. So I've popped the details in the chat there, and if you did want to leave a small donation, then of course that would also be very much appreciated, as well as any positive affirmation across social media for WAGADA Digital and the webinar that you have just attended if you have enjoyed it, or indeed a review perhaps on Google for WAGADA Digital, either our West of England office or our St Albans office as well. So yeah, all goes a long way, as you know, for us SMEs. So it'd be really great if you felt so inclined to do that. Brilliant. So a couple of questions for those who are staying on, which I'm just going to engage with now. There was one sorry, just bear with me. Just going back a little bit. Is there any way, this is a great question, Emily. I think it will be prevalent for a few people, so you might want to have a little think about this one. Is there any way to migrate existing data from Universal Analytics to a new GA4 installation? So data migration from the historic analytics to the now analytics, or is it just a case of, you know, exporting and downloading that data? And there's another question about a tracking issue with not set, so maybe we'll come on to that one separately. But did you have any feeling on migration of data and historic data that you've been building up on Universal Analytics?
That is where BigQuery comes in. It is a
Right.
case of exporting and downloading the data that you have in UA. Specifically into importing the data into the GA4 platform, I think I'd need to check with Ursula, our
Sure.
GA4 specialist on that. But you can certainly export and download your UA data so you have it, and then have a comparison with your GA4 data that you then collect.
Brilliant. This is a great question from Tara Sanchez. Hi, Dan. I'm really interested to know what section of a page users are bouncing off and going elsewhere to analyze if any key articles need rewriting. Is there a report on GA4 that would allow me to review page activity?
So that would be that would be a funnel exploration. So you would want to set up a funnel exploration report, and that's where you could see the drop off. You could equally also use the page exploration report as well that we went through to see whether people are getting to that page or dropping off or missing off a page that you would expect to see in that report. So the two exploration reports there would be the ones that you would want.
Yeah, Hotjar is also a great tool, right, Emily, for just general
Yeah,
page. So
yeah.
we use Hotjar with some clients. Again, you want to make sure that people are opting into that, to, you know, just to cookies in general. But Hotjar is a great resource that can let you literally see a user
Yeah,
journey on a page, what they're clicking on, where the cursor's going. It's super
yeah.
useful to be able to identify those key bits. Um, Tom has a question. Is there a way to address not set in inverted commas? Is that a tracking issue? Not sure what that was relating
Is
to, and probably part of your walkthrough is that not
there
set.
is there's we need a little bit more context behind that actually. So that is something we could probably help with separately, but not set is anything that in from a knowledge that Google Analytics can't get at that specific time. There's also issues with traffic sources that Google Analytics 4 can't define, and then for any part of that journey comes through is not set. But that's where UTMs would come in, and where
Yeah,
you'd want to mark up your campaigns.
yeah. Tom's also asking, are there any good resources that we're aware of that explain the differences between different dimensions and their best intended use? I mean, resource-wise, obviously Google actually has quite a lot of kind of informational and educational content, blogs.
Yeah, yeah, I'd
Would that be the best
agree.
place to go?
I'd agree that they do tend to specify in those resources what each dimension is as well, from their default dimensions they have in.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. A few messages are coming through privately, people saying that they found the session to be really, really beneficial. So I'm so glad about that. Yeah, thanks, Tom. Brilliant. And Pooja Depala, thank you, Emily and Daniel. Great session. Before we wrap up on this session, for those left, did anybody have any further questions that they either wanted to pop in the chat or ask? Thank you so much, Emily and Daniel. Very useful. Jargon free. We always try and be jargon free, Tara. That's the aim. Easy to follow training and need to run, but really appreciate the time. Brilliant. Really useful. Very helpful. Brilliant. Well, listen, folks, any final questions? Anybody wanted to unmute? Marvelous. In that case, all the very best with your Google Analytics journey. If you need anything further, don't hesitate to reach out. It's been great meeting you. So from Emily and myself, thank you ever so much and have a great rest of the day and a good week.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.